Okay, so we're heading down to got the pelvic girdle, and then we'll do the legs. So we finished the pectoral girdle and the upper appendages. So we'll do the pelvic girdle now and the lower appendages. So pelvic girdle is formed from two bones, two hip bones called the os coxae. Each one of them is called the os coxa. And each of the os coxa is formed from three fused bones: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. And interestingly enough, these bones are not fused in children. They're separated by hyaline cartilage. The ischium and pubis fuse between 4 and 8 years of age. Around puberty, the ilium fuses with the ischiopubic portion at the acetabulum, about 11 to 15 years of age in females, and 14 to 17 years old with males. There's also what's called the true and false pelvis. False pelvis extends across the top, the iliac crest of the pelvic hip bones. I'll show you that in a second. True pelvis is contained within the pelvic brim from the sacrum, the top of the sacral promontory, which is the top of the sacrum, around the rim to the pubic symphysis. And we'll talk about what the pubic symphysis is in a little bit. Next slide. So here is the bones of the pelvic girdle. So we have the sacrum. We have the sacrum and the base of the sacrum here, the SI joint here, as well as over here. And so this is the ilium here. So everything that's labeled in there is ilium or iliac something or other. So we have the iliac crest. So this is called the often called the superior iliac crest. This is the anterior superior iliac spine, the anterior inferior iliac spine. And then there's the depression that's here is called the iliac fossa. So that's a depression that's in the ilium. Then the ilium and ilium and the pubis come together. So here's the pubis, pointing to the brownish bones there, and you get what's called the pubic arch here from the two pubic bones coming together, and they come together at what's called the pubic symphysis, and that is a cartilaginous joint that has it's fibrocartilage there. It's slightly movable, and we'll talk about joints next time, actually. That joint is pretty solid, but it's slightly movable. Just like the sacroiliac joint is also pretty solid, but it is still possible to get some movement in that. Then below this, you have what this bluish, purplish part is called the ischium, and this part down here is where you sit. So if you can feel that, if you're by yourself and you want to feel your butt bone, you can feel your butt bone there. It's what you're sitting on right now. The hole that's here, and on this side both, there's a hole in that bone. It's called the obturator foramen. So foramen for hole and obturator foramen. And there's a nerve that goes through it called the obturator nerve. This area here is called the pelvic inlet there. And let's see what else. And then you have the sacrum and the coccyx shown there. There's a very, very deep depression on both sides. It's called the acetabulum, and there's where three bones come together: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. Where all the three bones connect, they connect and form this deep cavity called the acetabulum, and that's where the head of the femur fits in. So we're going to see that here in a little bit. So we got this area called the pelvic inlet, and then we have the pelvic brim going all the way across here. So that's the pelvic brim there. Okay, next slide. So here we go. You can see the bones of pelvic girdle. You have the iliac fossa, the body of the ilium, and the ischium down here. I've giving you a list of bone markings that you need to know. This is extensive on this slide. Your book is very extensive, and so I'm not interested in all of the things that they're pointing out here. Most of the things I'm going to point out: the obturator foramen, the pubis, pubic body, the acetabulum. You need to know the iliac crest. You need to know that this is the ileum, and that's the iliac fossa. This is the auricular surface of the ileum here, and this part here is called the greater sciatic notch. So the sciatic nerve goes through there, so you need a nice big notch, plenty of space for it to go through. And then you have the ischium down here, and you have a lesser sciatic notch down here, and the obturator foramen for the obturator nerve to run through. And that's pretty much it for this slide. Next slide. So the book made a big deal about the arcuate line and pectineal line making up the iliopectineal line. The arcuate line and pectineal line with the ridge of the sacral promontory, that makes up what's called the linea terminalis, which delineates the true pelvis and the false pelvis. The false pelvis is if you drew a line from the top way up here all the way down to here and did it across there. The true pelvis is actually this area here. So not that that matters a lot, but there are cases where you might be asked that kind of thing in some situations. You know, there's false pelvis versus true pelvis. So the false pelvis is everything contained within the ileum all the way down through the pelvis, and the true pelvis is really the lower portion. So next slide. So here's a better view of the right os coxa. It's the posterolateral, posterior and lateral view. You have the iliac crest up here, the superior iliac spine here, and you can feel these things on yourselves. You can feel the iliac crest very easily, the superior iliac spine, and the acetabulum obviously you can't feel because the head of the femur is stuck way in there. And then you have the pubic symphysis, obturator foramen, the ischium, and you're sitting on that ischial tuberosity down there. Then you have the lesser sciatic notch, the greater sciatic notch here, and there's also the posterior superior iliac spine here, posterior inferior iliac spine, ischial spine is here. So there's several parts that are everything's named always in anatomy. So next slide. So here's an actual human bone. You have the acetabulum here, the iliac crest up here, superior iliac spine, the inferior iliac spine. Oh my gosh, I'm losing it. And let's see, greater sciatic notch, lesser sciatic notch. So obturator foramen there, ischium down here, sort of in the ischial tuberosity. So that's all the same things again. So next slide. So, and to figure out if it's left or right, the easiest thing to do is to look for the acetabulum. So you know that's going to be on the outside. And then you look. What I do is I look for the pubic symphysis, or the pubic bone there. So here's your acetabulum here. The pubis is going to be pointing forward, and then there should be a large, the ileum should be pointing backwards. And there also should be the iliac, where the ileum joins with the sacrum to make the sacroiliac joint. That's a really rough surface, so you can see that very easily. So then you know that goes in the back, goes posterior. Next slide. So this is showing the greater pelvis or false pelvis and lesser or true pelvis in green. So here's the blue and green showing the greater and lesser pelvises. Next slide. Comparison of male and female pelvises. You have a wider female. It's a wider, greater pelvis. The sacrum is wider, a little bit shorter. The acetabula are farther apart. The pelvic inlet is more oval shaped. With men, the pelvis is narrower, the greater pelvis is narrower. The sacrum is longer. The acetabula are closer together. And the pelvic inlet is more heart-shaped. It's just narrower. So, because to allow for women to allow a larger area for the baby to go through in the birth canal. Next slide. So this is just another slide showing the various bones of the pelvis. Next slide. Here's a female pelvis. So you can see the width is fairly far across. Plus, this is more oval shaped here. Here's your pubic symphysis, your sacrum there. So, and the ilium on both sides is more flared out than it is in males. Next slide. That's a male pelvis, and the pelvic inlet here is not nearly as round, not nearly as oval shaped. It's closer to, not exactly heart shaped, but it's closer to it. And the ilium, the iliac crest, points a little more. It's a little more pointing anterior and posterior rather than lateral medial. Next slide.